The war had been raging for centuries, and humanity was losing. Across the galaxy, Earth's once proud civilization was being pushed to the brink of extinction by the Vorthons, a ruthless alien empire. Humanity's last hope lay in a secret project, a desperate plan designed to save the best of Earth's warriors. These soldiers, scientists, and leaders were placed into cryo-sleep, frozen in time, waiting for the moment when they could wake up and save what was left of their world. But that moment seemed impossibly far away, until now. In the depths of Earth's underground facility, where the last remnants of human hope lie hidden, the camera pans over rows of cryo-chambers, each housing a different soldier, frozen in an eternal sleep. The control room is silent, its walls filled with the hum of machinery that has kept the soldiers preserved for decades. The monitors show the countdown timer on each chamber, ticking slowly, almost as if time itself had stopped. Then, suddenly, a loud alarm blares across the room, piercing the silence. The lights flicker, casting an eerie glow. A team of scientists jump to their feet, their faces filled with shock. Something is happening. The monitors flash red. The countdown clocks for the cryo chambers start to accelerate. These soldiers, who have been frozen for centuries, are about to wake up. The first chamber unlocks, its door hissing open as steam rises from the cold metal. Inside, a figure stirs. Captain Cale Hunter, one of Earth's greatest warriors, opens his eyes to a world he doesn't recognize. His body is stiff, aching from the long years of hibernation. His mind is foggy as he tries to piece together what is happening. He tries to speak, but his voice cracks. His memories are a blur, fading in and out as he struggles to regain his senses. Where is he? What year is it? Why is everything so unfamiliar? The scientists look at each other, unsure of what to do. They were prepared for this moment, but no one was ready for the shock of seeing these soldiers wake up in the middle of a war they've missed. The monitors show the Vorthon fleet in full attack mode, their ships raining destruction on Earth's last strongholds. The countdown on the chamber readouts continues to speed up. The soldiers are awake, but they have no idea what's waiting for them. Cale steps out of the chamber, disoriented but ready for action. His instincts kick in. He doesn't know what's happening, but he knows one thing: Earth is in danger, and he is the last line of defense. The camera cuts to a view of the battlefield, a scene of utter chaos. A massive alien fleet, 50 ships strong, hovers in the sky above Earth's remaining cities. The Vorthons are powerful, far beyond anything humanity had prepared for. Their ships are sleek, advanced, and deadly. Waves of energy blast from their cannons, tearing into Earth's last outposts. The people of Earth are fighting back, but the Vorthons are overwhelming. Hope is all but gone. The camera zooms in on the countdown clock ticking faster, the pressure building with each passing second. Cale's eyes flicker with recognition as he watches the devastation unfold on the screens. He knows Earth can't survive another attack like this. The Vorthons are close to victory, and they're not holding back. The scientists scramble to ready the other cryo chambers, hoping that awakening more soldiers might give them a fighting chance. But it's a gamble. Can these soldiers, who have been asleep for centuries, even begin to understand the war they've missed? Cale looks at the team of scientists, his mind still clouded with confusion. "Tell me what happened," he says, his voice low but filled with urgency. The scientist in charge, Dr. Lena, looks at him with a mixture of awe and fear. "You're Captain Cale Hunter. You were frozen for over 300 years. Earth has been at war with the Vorthons for as long as anyone can remember. We thought we had lost. But you're the key to turning this around." The room grows tense as the countdown reaches its final seconds. The soldiers are waking up, but will they be ready? Will they be able to fight against an enemy so powerful, so advanced, that they have no idea where to even begin? The stakes are higher than ever, and the fate of humanity hangs in the balance. As the last cryo chamber opens, the soldiers step into a world they no longer recognize. The countdown clock hits 0, and the fate of Earth rests in the hands of these battle-weary warriors who are about to face an enemy far stronger than any they could have imagined. Suspense fills the air. Will these humans rise to the challenge? Will they be able to defeat the alien invaders who have nearly destroyed everything? The screen fades to black, leaving only the sound of distant explosions. As the first of many battles is about to begin, the Vorthons had launched their full assault on Earth's capital. The once vibrant city was now a crumbling ruin under the weight of the alien invaders. Buildings were on fire, and the streets were littered with debris. The last line of defense had been broken, and the human forces were retreating. But there was still hope, barely. The cryo-sleep soldiers, led by Captain Cale Hunter, had just woken up, and now, they were the only thing standing between humanity and complete annihilation. Cale and his team prepared for their first mission, to strike directly at the heart of the Vorthon fleet. It was risky, perhaps suicidal, but it was the only option left. The humans knew they couldn't win by traditional means, so they had to outsmart the Vorthons. The soldiers suited up in their combat armor, their faces hard with determination. They had been trained for this moment, but nothing could have prepared them for the scale of the destruction they were about to face. Cale gave them a nod, and the mission began. Using cloaking devices, old, but still functional, they snuck past the Vorthon defenses, slipping unnoticed into the heart of the enemy fleet. They were invisible to the alien sensors, relying on stealth to get close enough for a devastating strike. The soldiers moved like shadows through the darkness of space, their hearts pounding in their chests. Then, they saw it, the Vorthon dreadnought. A massive, heavily armored warship, floating in the darkness. It was the flagship of the enemy's fleet, and if they could disable it, it would be a crippling blow to the entire Vorthon army. Cale made the call. The team would board the ship and destroy it from within. The stealth mission was tense, every step a risk. The soldiers could hear the hum of the Vorthon ship's engines in the distance, and the sound of robotic drones patrolling the corridors. They approached the hull of the dreadnought, using their outdated technology to break through its defenses. They had to move quickly, time was running out. Inside the dreadnought, chaos erupted. The ship was full of alien warriors, robotic enemies, and AI-driven drones. As soon as they breached the ship's interior, the humans were greeted by blinding gunfire and a barrage of laser blasts. The Vorthons were everywhere, strange, towering creatures with advanced weaponry, and they were ready for a fight. But Cale's team was prepared. They fought with every ounce of their strength, using unconventional tactics to counter the superior technology of the Vorthons. The humans didn't have the same high-tech weapons or advanced AI, but they made up for it with raw courage and determination. They fought with everything they had, pushing back the aliens step by step. The battle was intense. Cale and his soldiers were outgunned and outmanned, but they kept moving forward. Every time a Vorthon warrior fell, another took its place. Robotic enemies clashed with the soldiers, sparks flying as their weapons collided. But Cale's team didn't falter. They pushed through, working together to clear a path toward the control room. In the midst of the battle, Bonner, one of Cale's closest allies, took a direct hit from a Vorthon energy blast. He fell, but not before firing back at the enemy, taking down 2 more aliens. His death was a devastating blow to the team, but it only fueled their determination. They couldn't stop now, not with so much at stake. Cale looked around at his team, each one fighting with everything they had. They were bleeding, exhausted, and surrounded. But they kept pushing forward. With a final, desperate charge, they reached the control room. The Vorthons were still fighting back, but Cale and his soldiers were relentless. They hacked into the ship's systems, overriding the Vorthon AI, and finally, they succeeded. The dreadnought's weapons powered down. The battle wasn't over yet, but the tide had turned. The humans had struck the first blow. As they fought their way back out of the ship, Cale's heart raced. They had done it. The Vorthon dreadnought had been crippled. It wasn't a victory yet, but it was a sign that humanity wasn't ready to give up just yet. The fight had only just begun. The team escaped the dreadnought as explosions rocked the massive ship. Their mission had been a success. Against all odds, they had made their first strike. But the war was far from over. They had just begun to show the Vorthans that humanity would not go down without a fight. The battle for Earth raged on, each moment more intense than the last. The Vorthans were relentless, and with every strike, their dominance seemed more certain. Yet, the human soldiers refused to give up. Despite being outgunned and outnumbered, they pushed forward, fighting with everything they had left. But as the war dragged on, the emotional toll of the fight began to weigh heavily on them. Captain Cale Hunter led his team through the chaos, their resolve unwavering, but deep inside, he could feel the crushing pressure of leadership. The stakes were personal now, not just for Earth's survival, but for the memories of the people they had lost and the future they were fighting to protect. The sounds of battle were everywhere. Laser fire crackled in the air, and the sky above them glowed with the fiery streaks of orbital bombardment as humanity's last forces fought to hold off the alien invasion. The ground shook with explosions, the sound of destruction echoing through the ruins of Earth's cities. Cale's heart was heavy, not only with the weight of their mission but with the deep loss that seemed to follow them like a shadow. Then came the moment that changed everything. Sergeant Bonner, one of Cale's closest allies, was hit during a brutal skirmish on the ground. The explosion sent him flying back, his armor damaged and his body bleeding. The team rushed to his side, but the damage was too severe. Bonner's breath was labored, and he struggled to speak. Don't stop," he whispered, his voice faint, "keep fighting, for Earth, for everyone." With those final words, Bonner's body fell still. The weight of his death hit the team like a wave. Bonner had been more than just a soldier, he had been a brother, a friend. His death was a gut punch, but Cale knew they had to keep moving. The enemy wouldn't wait for them to grieve. They had to keep fighting for the future, for Bonner's sacrifice, and for all those who had already given their lives. The soldiers stood in a silent moment of respect for their fallen comrade. Cale, standing at the front, clenched his fists, fighting back the surge of emotion that threatened to overtake him. Bonner had been his closest friend on the battlefield, and now he was gone. But Cale knew what he had to do. They couldn't afford to stop, not now. Bonner's memory, his courage, would live on through their actions. With a determined look in his eyes, Cale turned to his team. "We fight for Bonner. We fight for all of them," he said, his voice steady, though his heart was breaking inside. The soldiers nodded, their faces grim but resolute. They would honor Bonner's memory, and they would make sure his death wasn't in vain. The battle continued, but now there was a fire in the human soldiers' hearts, a fire fueled by the grief of their loss and the determination to push forward. They were fighting not just for their lives, but for all the lives that had been lost in this war. With every step, every strike, they carried their fallen comrades with them, making sure that their sacrifices meant something. The explosions above them lit up the sky like fireworks, destruction on a scale that no one could have ever imagined. Yet, through it all, Cale led his team forward with a quiet, unwavering determination. His face was a mask of resolve, but deep inside, he was broken. Every soldier who fell was a weight on his heart, but it only made him more determined to win. With every mission, every battle, the soldiers grew stronger. They were no longer just fighting for survival, they were fighting for their fallen comrades, for Earth, and for the future they had yet to build. The emotional toll of the war was enormous, but it also became their strength. They knew they could not afford to lose hope. They fought not just for themselves, but for all those who couldn't fight anymore. As Cale led his team into the next battle, his eyes never left the horizon. The war wasn't over. It would never be easy. But they had one thing the Vorthans would never understand, the will to survive. And as long as they had that, they would fight, no matter the cost. The Vorthan fleet was closing in on Earth's last stronghold, a city now reduced to rubble but still holding on against the alien invasion. Kale and his team had fought hard, but the time had come for one final push. The Vorthons were relentless, and humanity's defenses were on the brink of collapse. Kale knew that they had one chance left to win this war and save Earth. The only way forward was to strike at the heart of the Vorthon Command Center, a heavily fortified flagship orbiting above the planet. Kale gathered his team in the command room, the air thick with tension. They had all lost comrades, seen their world torn apart, and fought against impossible odds. But now, this final mission would define everything. If they succeeded, they could cripple the Vorthon fleet and give humanity a fighting chance. If they failed, Earth would fall. "Listen up," Kale said, his voice steady but heavy with the weight of responsibility. "We're going straight for their command center. We'll need everything we've got, AI hacking, guerrilla tactics, and sheer will. We won't get another shot." The soldiers nodded, determination written on their faces. They knew the risks, but they had no choice but to push forward. It was all or nothing now. The team launched their assault, infiltrating the Vorthon flagship with a mix of stealth and brute force. Using outdated cloaking devices and AI hacking tools, they managed to slip past most of the enemy defenses. But the closer they got to the command center, the heavier the resistance became. Vorthon drones, AI-controlled turrets, and elite soldiers were everywhere, but the human soldiers were relentless, using every trick in their arsenal to tear through the alien forces. Kale led the charge, his pulse quickening as they moved deeper into the ship. His team was unstoppable, using guerrilla tactics to disable enemy weapons and turn the Vorthon's own technology against them. Every corner they turned, another battle erupted. The sound of gunfire, explosions, and alien screams filled the air, but the humans didn't flinch. They were pushing forward, step by step, with no thought of retreat. As they reached the heart of the flagship, the final showdown loomed. The Vorthon Supreme General awaited them, the towering alien leader at the center of his command room, surrounded by his elite guards. Kale knew this would be the most dangerous moment of his life. The door to the command center burst open, and the soldiers charged in, weapons raised. The Vorthon Supreme General stood tall, his massive form armored in dark, alien technology. His eyes glowed with a malevolent intelligence as he sneered at the humans before him. "I knew you would come," the Supreme General said in a voice that sent a chill down Kale's spine. "But you're too late. Earth's destruction is inevitable." Kale gritted his teeth. "Not today. Not while we still fight." The final battle began. Lasers flashed, energy blasts illuminated the room, and the two forces collided with explosive force. Kale's team engaged the Vorthon guards, pushing forward as they fought to clear a path to the Supreme General. Kale and the alien leader locked eyes, each determined to come out on top. The clash between them was brutal, a battle of strength, skill, and willpower. Kale's heart raced as he parried the general's strikes, each move calculated but desperate. His mind raced with the knowledge that humanity's survival depended on this moment. He was fighting not just for himself, but for everyone who had fallen, for all the lives that still depended on them. The sound of lasers filled the air as the human soldiers battled the Vorthon forces. The once imposing command center now felt like a war zone, with explosions tearing apart the walls and the very floor shaking under their feet. The battle was fierce, but Kale never lost focus. He knew what he had to do. With a final, furious strike, Kale disarmed the Supreme General, sending his weapon flying across the room. The alien leader stumbled back, his eyes wide with shock. But Kale wasn't finished. With one last surge of strength, he brought his sword down, striking the Vorthon leader down in a single, decisive blow. The room fell silent. Kale stood, panting heavily, as the Vorthon Supreme General crumpled to the ground. His soldiers cheered, but Kale couldn't shake the weight of what they had just accomplished. The battle wasn't over, there were still Vorthon forces on Earth, still destruction to face. But in this moment, they had struck the heart of the enemy. The Vorthon fleet began to lose cohesion. Their command center had fallen, and with it, the hope of victory. As Earth's last bastion stood strong, the human soldiers had done the impossible. They had taken back their world. Kale looked around at his team, their faces grim but victorious. They had won the last stand. They had saved humanity. But the war was far from over. And Kale knew, as long as they still stood, they would never stop fighting. Against all odds, humanity had emerged victorious. The once mighty Vorthan fleet, which had wreaked havoc on Earth for so long, now lay in ruins. The enemy's command center had been destroyed, and with it, the backbone of their entire empire. The few remaining Vorthan ships, disoriented and without direction, surrendered to the human forces. Earth, though battered and broken, had withstood the storm. Humanity had won. The final battle had been brutal, but in the end, it was the human spirit that had triumphed. Kale stood on the broken surface of a Vorthan dreadnought, gazing out at the devastation around him. The massive alien ship was nothing more than a twisted hulk of metal, a symbol of humanity's victory. The sky above was still filled with smoke and the remnants of battle, but there was a strange peace in the air now. The war was over. But the victory felt bittersweet. Kale's heart was heavy as he looked out over the wreckage of Earth. The once thriving cities, the towering buildings, the lush forests, all reduced to ashes. The cost of this victory had been immense. So many had fallen. Sergeant Bonner, his closest ally, was gone. Other comrades had perished in the brutal fights, and Kale knew that the scars of war would stay with him forever. The price of freedom had been steep. Still, as Kale surveyed the battlefield, he felt a flicker of hope. The Vorthans were defeated, and the threat to humanity was gone. They had won against impossible odds, and that was something worth celebrating. They had proven that even in the darkest of times, humanity's will to survive could never be broken. The remaining soldiers of the human forces gathered around Kale. Some of them were covered in dirt and blood, their faces weary but resolute. The emotion of the moment was overwhelming, victory, yes, but also the profound loss they had all endured. As the team stood together, they shared a quiet, solemn moment of respect for their fallen comrades. They knew they couldn't bring them back, but they could honor their memory by rebuilding. "We did it," one of Kale's soldiers said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "We actually did it." Kale nodded, his gaze never leaving the horizon. "We did," he replied. But he knew the work wasn't over. The fight for survival was done, but now came the real challenge, rebuilding Earth. The war had left Earth in ruins, and the road ahead would be long and difficult. Cities had to be rebuilt, ecosystems restored, and the human race needed to heal from the wounds of war. But Kale believed in humanity. He believed that if they could survive this, if they could defeat an enemy as powerful as the Vorthans, they could rebuild anything. As the last of the Vorthan ships fell into the atmosphere, burning as it descended to the earth below, Kale turned to his team. "We've won," he said, his voice steady, though he could feel the weight of it all. "But the real work starts now. We rebuild what we've lost. And we make sure this never happens again." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, there was nothing but silence. But Kale could see the resolve in his soldiers' eyes. They had fought for their homes, for their families, and for each other. Now, they would fight to rebuild the world they had saved. The final moments were emotional, and as Kale and his team stood amidst the ruins of a destroyed Vorthan ship, they knew that the victory was not just about defeating an enemy, it was about proving to themselves that humanity was not just a species. It was a force of will. A force that could rise from the ashes of destruction and create something new. The sky was clearing, and the first light of dawn began to break through the clouds. It was the beginning of a new day. Humanity had survived, and now it would rebuild, stronger than ever. "Humanity is not just a species," Kale whispered, his voice filled with pride. "It's a force of will." And with that, the soldiers turned away from the battlefield, ready to begin the long journey of healing and rebuilding. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: humanity would endure.